Aliens demand surrender. Humans send a customer service survey. Broker Kael adjusted his ceremonial collar, a gaudy thing woven from the silk of Andromedan death moths, and smiled at the holographic display hovering above his desk. Numbers. Beautiful, ascending numbers. Profit margins that would make his ancestors weep with envy. "Commander Vrex," he purred into the comm, his voice dripping with the kind of confidence that came from never having been told no in any meaningful capacity. "Status report." The view screen flickered. Vrex's scarred face filled the frame, all tusks and battle scars and the kind of casual brutality that made him excellent at his job. "We're approaching the boundary now, broker. What did the council call it? The Sol Exclusion Zone." He snorted, a wet, derisive sound. "Looks empty to me." Kael leaned back in his chair. Genuine Vexarian leather cost more than a small moon, and laughed. It was a practiced laugh, the kind he'd perfected in boardrooms across 3 spiral arms. "Of course it looks empty, Commander. That's the point. The Galactic Council has been hoarding this sector for centuries. Do not enter. Extreme danger. Quarantine zone." He waved a dismissive hand. "It's all theater, bureaucratic gatekeeping to keep the little species from accessing prime real estate." He pulled up the file again. Species, human. Origin, Sol 3, colloquially Earth. Status, self-isolated. Threat level, unknown. Council recommendation, do not engage. Unknown. That was the word that had caught his attention 6 months ago, buried in a footnote of a footnote in a trade regulation document he'd been skimming for loopholes. Unknown didn't mean dangerous. Unknown meant opportunity. "Sir?" Vrex's voice carried a note of something that might have been caution in a less bloodthirsty species. "The buoys, there. Old, pre-council old. Some of them are in languages that haven't been spoken in millennia." "Exactly." Kael stood, pacing his opulent office. Outside the viewport, the Zenthori fleet stretched into the darkness. 47 ships, from nimble corvettes to the massive dreadnought, the profit margin itself. "They're trying to scare us with ancient history. Meanwhile, I've done my research. The humans sent out primitive radio signals for decades. Radio, Commander. Electromagnetic waves. They're barely post-industrial." He pulled up another file, this one showing grainy images of Earth. Blue oceans, green continents, primitive satellites in low orbit. "Look at this. No orbital defense platforms, no fleet, no nothing. They're sitting on a garden world in a resource-rich system, and they've been left alone because everyone's too afraid of some dusty old warnings." Vrex grunted. "And if the warnings are real?" "Then we negotiate." Kael's smile widened. "That's what I do, Commander. I negotiate, and if negotiation fails," he gestured to the fleet, "well, that's what you do." The bridge of the profit margin was a monument to excess. Gold-plated consoles, holographic displays showing stock tickers from a dozen markets, a full bar in the corner, because Kael believed in conducting business in comfort. The crew, hand-picked for their loyalty and their willingness to overlook certain legal gray areas, moved with practiced efficiency. Dropping out of FTL in 3, 2, 1. Reality twisted. The stars stopped streaking and became fixed points again. And there, hanging in the void like a jewel, was Earth. Kael had seen 1,000 worlds, conquered markets on barren rocks and gas giants and everything in between. But this was beautiful, pristine, untouched by the industrial sprawl that characterized most inhabited systems. "Scans?" he asked. "Minimal orbital infrastructure," reported his sensor officer, a nervous Quillen with too many eyes. "Some satellites, a few space stations, one small colony on the moon. No weapons signatures, no shield generators, sir. They're defenseless." Too easy. The thought flickered through Kael's mind and was immediately dismissed. He hadn't built his fortune by second-guessing himself. "Hail them," he ordered. "Let's introduce ourselves." The comm officer worked his console. Seconds passed, then a minute, then. The view screen flickered to life. Kael had prepared for many scenarios. A warlord, perhaps, all bluster and primitive weapons. A frightened leader ready to capitulate. A religious figure offering prayers instead of resistance. What he got was Administrator Susan. She was middle-aged. Human middle-aged, which meant she looked soft and harmless in a way that most species lost after their first century. She wore something that his cultural database identified as a cardigan, a garment with no apparent tactical or ceremonial purpose. She was holding a cup of tea. "Oh, hello," she said, her voice warm and grandmotherly. "I'm so sorry, we weren't expecting visitors. You've caught me right in the middle of my afternoon break." She took a sip of tea. "I'm Administrator Susan Chen. How can I help you today?" Kael blinked, recovered, deployed his most winning smile. "Administrator Chen, I am Broker Kael of the Zenthori Trade Consortium. I represent a coalition of interests seeking to establish mutually beneficial relationships with your species." "Oh, how lovely," Susan beamed. "We don't get many visitors. Well, we don't get any visitors, really. Not since we put up the signs. Did you see the signs?" "The warning buoys, yes, we." "Aren't they dreadful?" Susan shook her head. "So ominous. I keep telling the council we should update them, maybe add some flowers or something cheerful, but you know how bureaucracy is. Everything takes forever." Kael's smile tightened. "Indeed. Administrator, I'll be direct. Your system possesses significant resources. Your planet is remarkably pristine. We're prepared to offer very generous terms for trade rights and, shall we say, administrative partnership." "Oh, that's very kind of you, Mr. Kael, but I'm afraid we'll have to decline." Susan's smile never wavered. "You see, we have very strict zoning laws and noise ordinances. The neighbors, well, we don't have neighbors anymore, but the principle stands. We're quite happy with our quiet little corner of space." "I don't think you understand." Kael's voice hardened. "This isn't a request. This is a business opportunity, and in business there are consequences for refusing reasonable offers." "I understand perfectly, dear." Susan set down her teacup. "But I'm afraid the answer is still no. Now, I really must insist that you turn your ships around and—" "Commander Vrex," Kael said, cutting the transmission. "Fire a warning shot, that lunar colony, nothing fatal, just persuasive." Vrex's grin was all teeth. "With pleasure, sir." On the tactical display, one of the escort cruisers rotated, bringing its main plasma cannon to bear. The weapon charged, energy readings spiking. Kael watched the moon through the viewport, imagining the panic, the scrambling, the inevitable surrender. The plasma torpedo launched, a streak of superheated matter capable of vaporizing a city block. The comm crackled back to life. Susan was back, but she wasn't smiling anymore. She looked disappointed, the way a grandmother might look at a child who'd just drawn on the walls. "Oh dear," she said softly, "I really hoped we wouldn't have to do this. I haven't filled out a Form 99 in centuries." She started typing on a holographic interface that appeared in front of her. "Let me just— Yes, there we go. Authorization code Omega 77 Tango. Defensive protocol, minimal response." "What is she?" Kael began. The plasma torpedo vanished. Not exploded, not intercepted, vanished. One moment it was there on the tactical display, the next it simply wasn't. "What just happened?" Kael demanded. I don't know, sir." The sensor officer's eyes were wide. "It's just gone, no debris, no energy signature, it's like it never existed." A small object appeared on the view screen. Geometric, crystalline. It floated to where the torpedo had been, extended something that might have been an appendage, and seemed to scrub the space, like wiping a stain off a counter. Then it folded back into itself and disappeared. "Mr. Kael," Susan's voice was gentle, "I really do need to ask you to leave now, before things get complicated." Kael stared at the screen, at the pleasant cardigan-wearing woman with her tea, at Earth hanging peaceful and green in the void. "No," he said. "No, this is a trick, some kind of illusion. Commander Vrek's full assault. Show them what happens when they try to bluff the Zenthori Trade Consortium. Susan sighed. She looked genuinely sad. I was afraid you'd say that. She pressed a button, and the moon opened up. The craters were sliding back. Kael watched, his brain struggling to process what his eyes were showing him. The lunar surface, that peaceful, pockmarked sphere that had been there for billions of years, was moving. Craters that he'd assumed were ancient impact sites were retracting like mechanical irises, revealing. Mother of Prophet, someone whispered. Cannons. Cannons the size of cities. Massive, geometric structures that hummed with power, their barrels tracking the Zenthori fleet with the patient precision of a predator that had just woken up hungry. Sir, the sensor officer's voice cracked. I'm reading energy signatures that shouldn't be possible. Those weapons are drawing power from, I think they're tapping directly into the moon's core. No, wait. They're tapping into spacetime itself, sir. These readings don't make sense. Kael's mouth was dry, shields up, all ships evasive. Sir, the civilian ships. On the view screen, the peaceful orbital stations were changing. Their outer hulls were peeling away like skin, revealing black, angular armor underneath. What he'd taken for cargo haulers were shedding their disguises, transforming into warships that looked like they'd been designed by something that understood violence on a fundamental, mathematical level. They were hiding, Kael breathed. The whole time they were hiding. The comm crackled. Susan was back, still holding her tea, though she'd set down the cup to type with both hands now. I am so sorry about this, Mr. Kael, she said, and she actually sounded apologetic. Our automated defense protocols are a bit enthusiastic. We tried to keep them in sleep mode, but you did fire first. You woke the neighbors, as it were. Wait, Kael said, his voice strangled. Wait, we can negotiate, we can. Oh, I'm sure we can work something out, Susan said brightly. But first, the protocols need to run their course. It's all very automated, you understand. Bureaucracy. Can't stop it once it starts. One of the lunar cannons fired. Kael braced for impact, for the flash of light that would be the last thing he ever saw. But the weapon didn't fire at them. It fired around them. A beam of something that made his eyes hurt to look at, that seemed to bend space itself, that wrapped around the entire Zenthori fleet like a net. Movement systems offline, the helmsman shouted. We're frozen, sir, we can't move. What did they do? Kael demanded. Gravity anchor, Susan said helpfully. It's creating a localized field of intense gravitational distortion. You're not frozen exactly. You're just experiencing time at a slightly different rate than the space around you. Very safe. Mostly. There was that one incident in 2247, but we've fixed that bug. That's illegal, Kael shouted. Gravity weapons are banned by the Galactic Convention. Oh, is it? Susan looked genuinely surprised. I'm sorry, we've been out of the loop for a while. We have so many weapons that are illegal now. The Geneva Conventions, the Hague Protocols, the Galactic Accords. We stopped keeping track after the first few centuries. She smiled apologetically. We just call them the old toys now. Commander Vrex, Kael screamed into the comm. Return fire all weapons. Vrex's face appeared on a secondary screen. He looked pale, which was impressive for a species whose skin was naturally the color of old blood. Sir, I'm trying, but... His weapons console started singing. Not alarms, not warning klaxons, singing, a cheerful, childish voice warbling through some kind of nursery rhyme. Twinkle, twinkle, little star, how I wonder what you are. What is that? Vrex roared. Your AI has been compromised, Susan said, still typing. I'm very sorry about that. Our cyber warfare division gets a bit playful sometimes. They're mostly teenagers, you see. Very good at what they do, but they have a sense of humor about it. Teenagers. Kael felt like he was losing his mind. You let teenagers control your military systems. Oh, no, Susan laughed. They just handle the hacking. The actual weapons are controlled by the adults, much more responsible, mostly. On the tactical display, Kael watched his fleet systems light up like a festival. Every ship was being infiltrated simultaneously. Weapons systems, navigation, life support, everything was being accessed, analyzed, and casually subverted by an enemy that treated military-grade encryption like a child's puzzle. The radio signals, Kael whispered. The primitive radio signals we detected, they weren't primitive at all, were they? Oh, those old things, Susan looked nostalgic. No, those were just our entertainment broadcasts. We stopped using radio for actual communication around the time we figured out quantum entanglement. The signals you picked up were probably reruns of I Love Lucy or something. We do keep them running, though. Nostalgia, you know. A new object appeared on the view screen. It was small, barely the size of a fighter craft, but it moved with a fluid grace that made Kael's skin crawl. It approached one of his escort ships, the Dividend, and released a cloud of something. Silver dust. It glittered in the starlight, beautiful and terrible. What is that? Kael asked, though part of him didn't want to know. Susan glanced at another screen. Oh, that's just some gray goo. Self-replicating nanomachines. They'll disassemble your ship at the molecular level and repurpose the matter into something more useful. That's a war crime. That's banned by every civilized species in the galaxy. Is it? Susan frowned. We invented it before we knew there were other civilized species. We were going to use it for mining, but then we realized it was a bit too efficient. Kept eating things we didn't want eaten. We've got better control algorithms now, though. The silver cloud enveloped the Dividend. For a moment, nothing happened. Then the ship began to dissolve. Hull plating flaked away into more silver dust. Weapons systems crumbled. The entire vessel was being consumed, transformed, rebuilt into a sign. A giant neon sign, floating in space where the Dividend had been, cheerfully displaying the words, "Please depart." They added the neon, Susan said. That's new. I'll have to talk to them about that. Seems a bit wasteful. Kael couldn't speak, couldn't think. He watched another of his ships, the quarterly report, get hit by a different weapon. This one was a beam, pale blue, almost gentle-looking. The ship didn't explode, it just aged. Hull plating rusted, viewports cracked, systems failed. In the span of 30 seconds, Kael watched a state-of-the-art warship decay into a derelict hulk, then into debris, then into dust that scattered into the void. Time dilation, Susan explained. That ship just experienced about 10,000 years in half a minute. Very effective, but the cleanup is a nightmare. All that dust. Stop, Kael whispered. Please stop. I'm sorry, Mr. Kael, but I can't stop the protocols once they've started. I can, however, escalate to the next level if you continue to show hostile intent. She looked genuinely regretful. I really didn't want to use the Class A munitions. It's so much paperwork. Class A? Kael's voice was hollow. What's Class A? Susan pulled up a form on her holographic interface. It was labeled Authorization for Use of Existential Threat Level Weaponry. She started filling it out, checking boxes, adding her digital signature. The really nasty stuff, she said. The things we built when we were still afraid of each other, before we unified. Before we realized that the real threat wasn't other humans, but what we were capable of doing to ourselves. She paused. And apparently to others. A new ship appeared on the tactical display. It was small, sleek, and it moved toward the center of Kael's fleet with purpose. What is that? Kael asked. Black hole generator, Susan said. Portable singularity projector. It'll create a small black hole inside your largest ship's engine room. Very precise, very clean, no debris. You can't, that's impossible. The energy requirements alone. We tap zero-point energy, Susan said. Vacuum fluctuations. There's infinite power in empty space, Mr. Kael. You just have to know how to ask nicely. The device activated. Kael watched his flagship, not the profit margin, thank the markets, but the dreadnought hostile takeover, simply collapse. The center of the ship folded in on itself, matter compressing, light bending, and then there was nothing. Just empty space where a ship carrying 3,000 crew members had been. "They're dead," Kael said numbly. "You killed them all." "Actually no," Susan said. "We evacuated them first. Teleportation. They're all in a holding facility on Mars right now, bit confused but unharmed. We'll send them back with you when you leave." "When we leave," Kael laughed, a broken sound. "You're going to let us leave?" "Of course," Susan looked surprised. "Mr. Kael, we're not monsters, we're just very good at defending ourselves. It's why we isolated ourselves in the first place." Her expression softened. "We didn't want to hurt anyone, we just wanted to be left alone." Kael stared at Earth, at the peaceful, green world that had just casually demonstrated the ability to erase his entire fleet from existence. "You're not pacifists because you're weak," he said slowly. "You're pacifists because you're traumatized." Susan's smile was sad. "We're pacifists because we remember what we did to each other before we learned to stop, and we're terrified of what we might do to others if we ever forgot those lessons." She pressed another button. "Now, Mr. Kael, I'm going to need you to formally surrender. It'll make the paperwork much easier." The bridge of the profit margin had descended into chaos. Alarms were screaming, the ones that hadn't been hacked to play children's songs anyway. Crew members were shouting. Vrex was bellowing orders that no one could follow because their ships couldn't move, couldn't fight, couldn't do anything except sit in space and wait for whatever fresh horror the humans decided to unveil next. Kael sat in his chair, watching his entire fortune evaporate in real time. The stock tickers on his holographic displays were plummeting. His insurance premiums were going to be astronomical, assuming he survived to pay them. "Sir," Vrex's face appeared on the comm, and for the first time since Kael had hired him, the commander looked genuinely afraid. "Sir, I'm sending out the fighter squadrons. Maybe if we can get close enough." "Don't," Kael said, but it was too late. 40 fighters launched from the remaining escort carriers, sleek little craft piloted by the best mercenaries money could buy. They scattered, using evasive patterns that had been perfected over centuries of warfare, approaching Earth from multiple vectors. The humans released another cloud. This one was different from the gray goo. It was silver, yes, but it moved with purpose, with intelligence. It didn't spread like a mist. It hunted. The first fighter disappeared into the cloud. Then the second. Then all of them, swallowed by a swarm of nanomachines that moved like a living thing, like a school of fish or a flock of birds, each individual unit coordinating with billions of others in perfect, terrifying harmony. Evasive maneuvers. Someone screamed, but it didn't matter. The cloud consumed the fighters in seconds. Kael watched on the tactical display as 40 green dots winked out of existence, replaced by a single, massive silver mass that hung in space, pulsing, reorganizing itself. Then it started building something. "What is it doing?" Kael whispered. The silver mass was taking shape. Letters. Giant, three-dimensional letters, each one the size of a fighter craft, assembled from the repurposed matter of his own ships. "Please depart." The same message as before, but bigger, brighter. The letters were glowing now, lit from within by some kind of bioluminescence or chemical reaction. They rotated slowly, ensuring that every ship in the fleet could see them clearly. "They're mocking us," Vrex growled. "They're using our own people to mock us." "The pilots?" Kael asked, his voice hollow. "Teleported to Mars," Susan's voice came through the comm, still cheerful, still apologetic. "Along with everyone else from the ships we've disabled. We're keeping a running tally. Current count is, let me see, 47,312 individuals. We've got them in comfortable accommodations, 3 meals a day, entertainment, medical care. We're not barbarians, Mr. Kael." You're using weapons that violate every convention of civilized warfare, Kael shouted. Well, yes, Susan admitted. But we're using them nicely. No one's actually died yet. That's got to count for something. Another ship, the leveraged buyout, tried to break free from the gravity anchor. Its engines flared, burning at maximum output, tearing themselves apart in an attempt to escape. A beam lanced out from one of the lunar cannons. It was thin, precise, almost delicate. It touched the ship's engine core and time stopped. Not for Kael, not for the rest of the fleet, just for the leveraged buyout. The ship hung in space, frozen mid-explosion, fire and debris suspended in a bubble of distorted space-time. Stasis field, Susan explained. We'll keep them like that until we can safely extract the crew. The explosion will complete once we release the field, but by then everyone will be safe on Mars, probably wondering what happened, but safe. How? Kael asked. How do you have this technology? The galaxy has been spacefaring for millions of years, and no one has weapons like this. No one has defenses like this. Susan was quiet for a moment. When she spoke, her voice was softer, more serious. Mr. Kael, do you know what humans are really good at? Apparently killing, Kael said bitterly. No, well, yes, but that's not what I meant. Susan leaned forward, and for the first time, Kael saw something other than grandmotherly kindness in her eyes. Something old, something tired. We're good at being afraid. We spent our entire evolutionary history being prey. We were hunted by things bigger, stronger, faster than us. We survived by being clever, by making tools, by turning our fear into innovation. She gestured to something off-screen. Then we became the apex predator on our own world. And we turned that fear on each other. For thousands of years, we built better and better ways to kill our own species. We got very good at it. Nuclear weapons, biological warfare, nanotechnology, AI. We kept pushing, kept innovating, kept finding new ways to make extinction more efficient. And then, Kael asked, transfixed despite his terror. And then we almost succeeded. Susan's expression was haunted. We came within minutes of destroying ourselves, multiple times, and each time we pulled back from the brink, but we never forgot how close we came. So we made a choice. We unified. We turned all that innovation, all that fear, all that desperate cleverness toward one goal, making sure we never had to be afraid again. She smiled, but it wasn't warm anymore. It was the smile of a predator showing its teeth. We built weapons that could crack planets, engines that could move stars, defenses that could stop entropy itself. And then we locked them all away and promised ourselves we'd never use them. We isolated ourselves because we knew that if we ever met another species, we'd either have to trust them completely or destroy them utterly. There was no middle ground, not for us, not with what we're capable of. So you hid, Kael said. We hid, Susan agreed. We put up the warning signs. We made ourselves look primitive. We hoped that if we just stayed quiet, stayed small, the galaxy would forget we existed. Her eyes hardened. And then you showed up and fired on our moon. Another weapon activated. This one came from Earth itself, from a facility hidden somewhere in the Pacific Ocean. It was a beam of pure white light, and it touched one of the escort carriers. The Profit Margin II. Kael had been very proud of that name, and the ship simply stopped. Not frozen, not destroyed. It just stopped existing in the same way everything else existed. It was there, but it was also not there, occupying some quantum state between reality and void. Quantum disassociator, Susan said. That ship is currently existing in a superposition of states. It's both destroyed and intact, both here and not here. We'll collapse the waveform once we've extracted the crew, and it'll resolve into whichever state is most convenient. Probably intact, since we're trying to be nice about this. This is insane, Kael breathed. You're insane. Your entire species is insane. Yes, Susan said simply. Yes, we probably are. That's why we stay away from everyone else. Vrex's voice crackled over the comm. Sir, I'm reading a new contact. Something big. It's coming from behind the moon. Kael's blood ran cold. How big? Dreadnought class. No bigger, sir. It's the size of a small moon itself. The ship emerged from behind Luna like a whale rising from the depths. It was black, angular, covered in geometric patterns that hurt to look at. Weapons bristled from every surface. Engines that could move planets glowed with barely contained power. That's the consequence, Susan said. Our flagship. We built it during the Unification Wars. It's never fired its main weapon in combat. We've only ever tested it once on an uninhabited system. She paused. There's no longer an uninhabited system there, just a cloud of exotic particles and some very confused physicists. What does it do? Kael asked, though he wasn't sure he wanted to know. It's a star killer, Susan said. It fires a beam that induces rapid fusion cascade in stellar bodies. Your sun would go supernova in approximately 47 seconds. We'd have time to evacuate Earth, of course. We've got contingencies, but your fleet, she trailed off meaningfully. Kael stared at the massive warship, at the weapon that could end solar systems, at the casual, terrifying competence of a species that had built such things and then hidden them away because they were too dangerous to use. I surrender, he said. I'm sorry, Susan cupped her ear. I didn't quite catch that. I surrender, Kael screamed. I surrender, we all surrender, please just stop showing us these things. Susan's smile returned, warm and grandmotherly once more. Oh, wonderful. That saves us the trouble of the planet Cracker. It's a nightmare to calibrate and the paperwork is just dreadful. There's something worse than the Star Killer, Kael asked weakly. Oh, honey, Susan said, and she actually sounded sympathetic. The Star Killer is just the consequence. We have 12 other dreadnoughts. Each one has a different specialty. Would you like to hear about the regret? It manipulates probability fields. Or the apology, that one weaponizes entropy. Or... No, Kael said quickly. No, I'm good, I'm very good. We're leaving right now. Excellent, Susan clapped her hands together. I'll have our repair crews fix up your ships. Can't have you limping home after all. What would people think? The nanobots arrived within minutes. They swarmed over the profit margin like ants over a picnic, but instead of consuming, they were repairing. Kael watched through the viewport as hull breaches sealed themselves, as damaged systems rebuilt themselves, as his ship was restored to perfect working order. Better than perfect, actually. Sir, the engineer reported, his voice awed. They've upgraded us. The power core is running at 140% efficiency. The shields are using some kind of technology I've never seen before, and they restocked the minibar. They what? The minibar, sir, it was empty, now it's full. They even added some earth beverages, something called whiskey and, is this chocolate? Kael put his head in his hands. The other ships were receiving similar treatment. The ones that had been destroyed were being rebuilt from scratch, assembled by clouds of nanobots that worked with impossible speed and precision. The crews that had been teleported to Mars were being returned, looking confused but unharmed. Some of them were even smiling, talking about the food they'd been served, the entertainment they'd been shown. They gave us a tour, one pilot reported, of their museums, their history. They wanted us to understand why they isolated themselves. He shuddered. Sir, the things they did to each other before they unified, the wars, the weapons. We're lucky they're pacifists now. We're lucky they're traumatized, Kael corrected bitterly. A data packet arrived on his personal console. He opened it warily, expecting another weapon schematic or threat. It was a bill. Invoice for services rendered. Line items. Ammunition used, 47 units of various types. Emotional distress, calculated based on crew size and engagement duration. Lawn maintenance, debris removal from SAW system. Repairs and upgrades, complimentary first-time customer discount. Teleportation services, 47,312, individuals transport. Catering, meals provided to detained personnel. Entertainment, museum tour and educational materials. Total due, 0 credits. Note, first offense is free. Please don't make us send a second invoice. Kael stared at the screen. They'd itemized everything. They'd calculated the cost of their mercy down to the credit, and then they'd waived it with a polite threat wrapped in corporate speak. The comm chimed. Susan appeared one last time. "Mr. Kael," she said, and her voice was gentle but firm. "Your ships are repaired. Your crews are safe. We're going to release the gravity anchor now and give you a little push toward the edge of the system. I need you to do something for me." "What?" Kael asked tiredly. "Tell your friends we're closed." Susan's expression was serious. "Tell them the warnings are real. Tell them that humanity isolated itself not because we're weak, but because we're dangerous. Tell them that we really, truly, desperately want to be left alone." She leaned closer to the camera, and for just a moment the mask slipped. The grandmotherly warmth vanished, replaced by something ancient and predatory, something that had climbed to the top of the food chain through millions of years of evolution and thousands of years of warfare. "Tell them that if they come here looking for conquest, they'll find something much worse. They'll find a species that spent its entire existence learning how to kill and then spent centuries trying to forget. Tell them that our mercy has limits, and tell them that next time we won't be so polite." The mask returned. Susan smiled, warm and kind once more. "Have a safe trip home, Mr. Kael, and please do leave us a review. We're always looking to improve our customer service." The transmission ended. The gravity anchor released. Kael felt the ship lurch as it was suddenly free to move again. But they weren't just free, they were being pushed. Some kind of tractor beam or gravity manipulation was accelerating the entire fleet toward the edge of the system at speeds that should have torn them apart but somehow didn't. In minutes they were at the boundary. The warning buoys hung in space, ancient and ominous, their messages scrolling in a dozen dead languages. Kael pulled up the holographic interface, found the paint tool. With shaking hands, he added a new message to the nearest buoy in every language he knew. "Here be monsters." The fleet jumped to FTL, fleeing the Sol system like prey escaping a predator's den. Kael sat in his chair, staring at nothing, trying to process what had just happened. His fortune was intact. His ships were better than new. His crew was alive and healthy. By any objective measure, he'd gotten off lightly. But he'd seen behind the curtain. He'd seen what humanity was capable of. He'd seen the weapons they'd built, the horrors they'd created, the casual, terrifying competence with which they wielded power that could end civilizations. And he'd seen the fear in Susan's eyes, the desperate, pleading fear of a species that knew exactly what it was capable of and was terrified of ever having to prove it again. A notification popped up on his console. Customer Satisfaction Survey. How was your invasion experience? Please rate us 1 to 5 stars. Questions. 1. Were our defensive measures clearly communicated? 2. Did you feel your concerns were heard? 3. How would you rate the professionalism of our staff? 4. Would you recommend the Sol system to other potential invaders? 5. Additional comments. Kael stared at the survey for a long moment. Then, with a laugh that was equal parts hysteria and disbelief, he filled it out. 5 stars across the board. In the additional comments section, he wrote, "Humanity is terrifying. Stay away. For the love of all that's profitable, stay away." He hit submit. A response came back immediately. "Thank you for your feedback. We're glad we could resolve your concerns. Have a nice day." Kael closed his eyes and tried very hard not to think about what other weapons humanity had hidden away. What other horrors they'd built and then locked in a closet, hoping never to use them again. He failed. He would spend the rest of his life failing. And every night, he would dream of a pleasant, middle-aged woman in a cardigan, sipping tea and smiling as she casually erased ships from existence. Behind him, through the viewport, the Sol system receded into the distance. Earth hung there, blue and green and beautiful, a garden world hiding an arsenal that could end the galaxy. The warning buoys spun slowly in the void, their messages clear to anyone who bothered to read them. But Kael had added his own warning now, his own testimony to the truth that the Galactic Council had been trying to protect everyone from for centuries. Humanity wasn't isolated because they were primitive. They were isolated because they were apocalyptic. And they were staying that way because they loved the galaxy too much to risk showing it what they could really do. Kael pulled up his personal log and began to record. This is Broker Kael of the Zenthori Trade Consortium. If you're listening to this, if you're thinking about approaching the Sol system, if you're looking at those warning buoys and thinking they're just bureaucratic nonsense, don't make the mistake I made. Don't assume that silence means weakness. Don't think that isolation means opportunity. He paused, choosing his words carefully. Humanity is kind. Humanity is merciful. Humanity is polite. But humanity is also the most dangerous species in the galaxy, and they know it. They've spent centuries trying to atone for what they did to themselves. They've hidden themselves away to protect us from them. And if you're stupid enough to threaten them, if you're arrogant enough to think you can conquer them, they will show you exactly why they put up those warning signs. He stopped the recording, encrypted it, set it to broadcast on every major trade channel in the galaxy. Let them call him a coward. Let them say he'd lost his nerve. He didn't care. He'd seen the truth. And the truth was that humanity had earned their isolation. They'd earned their peace. They'd earned the right to be left alone. Because the alternative was a galaxy full of species learning exactly what humanity, fuck yeah, really meant. And nobody wanted that. Nobody except the humans themselves, who'd already learned that lesson the hard way and spent every day since trying to forget it. Kael looked at the minibar. At the bottle of whiskey the nanobots had left, he poured himself a drink, his hands still shaking. To humanity, he said to the empty bridge, may we never meet again. He drank and tried very hard not to think about the customer service survey, or the 5 stars he'd given them, or the fact that somewhere in the Sol system, Administrator Susan was probably filing his feedback in triplicate and wondering if they should update their warning buoys to include flowers. The galaxy spun on, vast and ancient and full of wonders. And in one small corner of it, humanity sat quietly, drinking tea and maintaining their weapons and hoping, desperately, fervently hoping, that they'd never have to use them again. Thank you for listening. If you enjoyed this story, consider subscribing for more journeys. Share your thoughts in the comments and stay tuned for the next adventure.